Today I want to talk a little bit about Professor Jordan Peterson. Now, the first thing I want to note is that there are many positive things to say about the man and about the message that he's putting across to multitudes around the world, mainly through social media, especially YouTube. Now, when I look at Professor Jordan Peterson and listen to snippets, if you will, of his lectures, sometimes longer sections, sometimes quite short selections from sites like Philosophy Insights and Dose of Truth on the YouTube channels, what I notice is the following. The man appears to have a kind of paternal grace, a vocation. Yes, he's a professor, he's a teacher and a writer, but what he does with his students is not just a job, it's a calling. He has a vocation, and he does have a spiritual sensibility. He would be described as a kind of Christian, a Christian sympathizer at least, if not an Orthodox Christian in the conventional sense. But he seems to have a paternal grace over what he does, a kind of gift for teaching in a fatherly way. Now, it's not just that he talks about the importance of masculinity and fatherhood in healthy societies, but that he models it. When you watch him lecture, he doesn't just provide knowledge, but more importantly, wisdom, and he does differentiate between the two. He is a professor of psychology, and of course he gives much psychological insight, but he's aiming for more than just, if you like, clinical instruction. So whether it's his lectures or whether it's his interviews, he's a man who thinks deeply and provides those he talks to not merely, as I said, with wisdom, with knowledge, but with a wisdom that has a fatherly, if you like, tough love edge. There's, as I say, a paternal aspect to what he does, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are a number of his students, especially male but not exclusively male, who have come from broken homes, who would see him as a father figure, whether or not they communicate that to him. He's a man of courage, of honesty, and of open-heartedness. Again, we can see this in much of his work, including his work online. He's become famous because of his refusal to go along with certain new legislation in Canada which threatens free speech, and which indeed institutes what he calls compelled speech, telling people not only what they can't say but what they must say in certain circumstances, depending on who they're talking to. And of course he opposes this because of his commitment to freedom of speech in the classical liberal tradition. Now, he rightly connects our Western inheritance of honouring and encouraging universal individual dignity, responsibility and freedom with biblical revelation. In other words, he looks at our Western inheritance, which has led to the Western world as we know it, an inheritance which does dignify the individual and grant each individual, if you like, a sovereign responsibility for their own life, and therefore a freedom in order to do that. He looks at all that and says that this is not merely due to principles from, say, the Enlightenment or what we've inherited from the Greek philosophers of ancient days, but is intimately connected with the concept of man, the anthropology, if you will, found in the scriptures, the Christian and Jewish scriptures. Not just in what they command or in what they instruct, but in their narrative structure, the stories they tell, and what this tells us about human nature, human responsibility, human dignity. And he has an insight into this aspect of the scriptures that is profound and important. So I first want to register the fact that I have a great deal of time for what he does and a great deal of respect for what he does. But I also today want to make a little bit of a critique of certain statements that he has made. And it will start out mainly as a philosophical critique rather than a theological critique. And then I'll move to some theological implications a little further on. So I want to start with an interview he did with Stephen Crowder, where he makes a very strong distinction between what I think in other places he's called descriptive truths, truths about facts, about the world, and performative truths, or truths about how we should behave. And so I'll just play this little bit of video just to give you a feel.
Problems with, I would say, with modern Christianity, and this is a terrible overgeneralization, is that the Christians haven't done a very good job of separating their claims from scientific claims.
Right.
And that's particularly true on the fundamentalist Protestant side of the distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason there is that it's not obvious to people that there can be more than one type of truth. And what my understanding is that religious truth is fundamentally behavioral truth. It's truth to act out. And that doesn't make it less true. In fact, in some sense, it makes it more true.
Mm-hmm.
This is a philosophical issue that we can't discuss because it's too time-consuming. But roughly speaking, there's two things that people need to know. They need to know what the world's made of, and they need to know how to act in it.
Mm-hmm.
And proper religious doctrines are about how to act in the world. They're about the world as a place of action. And the world is a place of action.
Right.
And religious stories lay out the structure of the world as a place of action.
Yeah.
And then they tell you how to act in it. And there are reasons for that. And so...
Well, I find that interesting because I was talking about this with, I don't know who I was talking.
All right, we'll just stop there for a moment.